Good morning. Hope everybody had a terrific weekend. And thank you all for those who sent in their quizzes on radio. Again, it's one of my favorite chapters. It's an amazing journey radio's been through and still continues to go through. Again, one of the things I had mentioned last time is radio is still significant. Even though it's on the back burner for a lot of you all, you're college students. Radio is not supposed to be that big a deal with you, especially now with such great streaming services. But again, one of the significant ways that radio stays relevant is in the car and in our area. Okay? Once we get through the whole COVID thing and we're back to normal, when you're talking about, getting to the George Washington Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, if there's an accident, you go to 1010 Winds, you try to find out, what it is, how long it's been there, how many lane closures are there, whether even people will still, if they can't get to, especially in the car, if they have to hear about school closings or that kind of thing during a snow emergency. So radio still stays rather relevant, even with all the technological advances, thanks to the automobile. So, also, I written on quite a few of your quizzes, a lot of you, for number 10 on the quiz, about what streaming station, and a lot of you just put the streaming service that you put, but I was looking for something specific, and this has a lot to do more with how I really discovered how cool streaming radio really was. Like, for example, I go out to my backyard, I'm sitting by the pool all day, all right? The hard life of a professor, right? And what I do is I take my tablet or I take my phone and I plug it into an old receiver that I had when I had Sirius radio, and I'll put on iHeart, but then I'll put on like Van Halen, or I'll put on Journey, and then of course that station will play a Journey song or a Van Halen song, and then play other artists similar to that, usually from the 80s and that kind of thing. Or probably what really enlightened me to how very cool it could be to stream radio. It was a little over 10 years ago, and my wife and I are getting close to getting married, and we're visiting some of her friends who happen to be in Lyndhurst, my old hometown. And we're it's just a little party and not a big deal, and it was in the house. It was raining that day, even though it was August. So everybody else in the house, and in the back, she had like a back porch area, enclosed, where all the food was. And she also had a laptop. And it was playing music. And it was this great music station, like almost like a 103.5, a dance rhythmic music station. And the DJ was very cool, and the music, everything was moving great with the station. I really liked it. And then I realized, it wasn't 103.5. She was listening in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, in Bergen County. She was listening and had us listening to the number one dance music station in Miami, Florida. All right? And that's when I thought, you know what, this thing could be very good. And even today, sometimes when I'm streaming a station, I'll go ahead and stream Thunder 106. For those who are country music fans, that is the number one music station in the Monmouth Ocean County market. For those who don't know, when it comes to radio markets, New York City is the largest market in the country, number one radio market. Los Angeles is number 2. Chicago's number 3. And then as you get down, you get different markets. Well, even in New Jersey, we have different size markets. Like Morristown is its own radio market. Hence, most of the radio stations you pick up are from New York, but you do have a couple of stations from that northwest middle part of New Jersey. Sussex County is its own market. But also, Monmouth Ocean County is market number 51, which isn't bad when you consider that the city of Indianapolis is market 40, and I think Jacksonville is like market number 58. So Monmouth Ocean County is a very significant market. And especially because a lot of people like to listen to FM, as you guys know, you get down to Seaside Heights, and any of the New York City radio stations you lose. Okay? So Monmouth Ocean County is a significant market, and of course the number one station for the last 100 years, it seems. Actually, I think they went on the air in 1988. And that's New Jersey 101.5. And what's interesting about that station is that in most of the New Jersey markets, it is number one. But because they originate in Trenton, by the time you get up to our area, Bergen County, you really can't pick up New Jersey 101.5 in New Jersey, in Bergen County. But you start going down, I'd say around the beginning of Union, if you're on the Parkway, and you get to like exit 138, which is like Roselle Park, Elizabeth, Cranford, okay? Now you start to pick up 101.5. And then from there through the rest of the state, it is far and away the number one radio station. But for music, the number one station in Monmouth Ocean County is Thunder 106. And they've got a great sound if you like country. I mean, I like all kinds of music. But when I'm in the mood for country, I'll go ahead and stream Thunder 106. So, and again, you can get this through iHeart or through some of your others, Pandora, Spotify. And so I was looking for specific stations, especially because every once in a while, especially in the summer, it's just the kind of guy I am. If I got iHeart, I'm putting on my yacht rock. All right. But now it's time to move on to television, which is just an amazing history of how television began and where it's been going. And where, as we'll talk about Thursday, where it's ending up right now. Television is in a very, very interesting place. Before we get into television, just a couple of news items. When you talk about television, a little interesting here. Game 2 of the NBA Finals between the Lakers and the Heat only drew 4.2 million people. It is the lowest rated NBA Finals in the history of television ratings. So, don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm a guy from the 80s. I remember when it was Larry Bird and the Celtics versus Magic Johnson and the Lakers, and they'd go in prime time and, a good Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, game 3, game 4, and you might get 45 million people. Even before Michael Jordan hit the scene, those two going at it, Jordan and, Magic and Bird, just ratings through the roof. So to see it come down as far, especially when the NBA had come down significantly, especially once they started moving the playoffs and the finals onto cable television, whether it's TBS, whether it's ESPN or such. Kobe helped to rescue it. And then, of course, came LeBron. And that whole LeBron versus the Warriors, whether LeBron was with the Heat or with the Cavaliers, and with the Warriors going back and forth, those 2 or 3 years, there was some dynamite ratings. But now, the whole political situation, and of course the mess that is COVID, the ratings are the lowest in its history. So it's going to be interesting to see what the NBA does. Also, as was announced this morning, Regal Cinemas, and there's about 530 of them in America, are going to be closing. And it's a shame. What happened was they made an announcement, I think a day or two ago, that the new James Bond film would not be released until the spring, and it was supposed to be released now. That comes on the heels of Wonder Woman 1984. It was supposed to be released in October. That's not going to be released till the spring. And so COVID is really having some more victims, and who knows if these theaters will ever open up again. So, and of course, what that also means is we're going to start moving further, I believe, and this is my opinion. It's been my opinion for a long time, is that we're going to move closer to where first-run films will be released to your homes. But it'll cost you. I mean, let's say, for example, if the Wonder Woman 1984, if, as I see it coming in the very near future, it's released right to your homes, it would cost you $25. But that would then be a night. Like, you would take your big screen, because again, your parents, nobody buys a 15-inch screen or a 22-inch screen TV anymore. You got to have the 65 or 70-inch screen. And most times that's why you're waiting online outside of Best Buy on that night before Thanksgiving or the Thanksgiving night before Black Friday. Everybody's trying to get that big screen TV. So, but what it'll do is it'll cost you like $25, but you'll have like 5 or 6 people over your house to watch it instead of going to a theater on the Friday it opens. You'll instead on that Friday have it in your home. They've been talking about it for years. It never really happened. And then last year, I think it was November last year, we saw it with The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. This, of course, was with all the old guys. De Niro, Pacino, Joe Pesci. What they did was it was a Netflix film. They released it in theaters, but it was only in theaters for 3 weeks. Now, typically, a movie like that with those kind of stars, you're going to be in the theaters for about 6 weeks before you start reducing theaters. Like it might open nationwide in 3,000 theaters. It'll stay in 3,000 theaters for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you start, a couple of hundred will drop it, another couple of hundred will drop it, and usually it takes about 12 or 14 weeks before it leaves all theaters. Well, what happened with Netflix's The Irishman, it was in theaters for 3 weeks, and then boom, it was gone completely and went right to Netflix, and of course Netflix used that to help gain subscribers, which it did. I mean, it was a huge movie, and what's more is the target audience. Yeah, people my age who maybe hadn't gotten Netflix yet, or even people older than me who hadn't gotten Netflix yet, especially because, remember, this is pre-COVID. So Netflix is hurting right now. Netflix at that time, it's after Disney Plus had been released, so they're hurting and they're looking to build up an audience, and boom, it helped out. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. So now, with television, radio by the 1930s, of course, is the big deal. But this guy here, he's fooling around with stuff out in California around 1930s. A guy by the name of Philo Farnsworth. And what he invented was this contraption right here. What this is called is the Image Dissector. All right. Now, what he did, and people were really fooling around with a lot of electronic energy at this time. That guy Edison, that Jersey boy, really got people going when it came to taking electricity and harnessing it. So what he did is he took the lens, that's what's in his hand, off of like a camera, like a still photo camera. One of those big ones that they used to take formal portraits with. And he hooked up some electronics to it, and then he hooked it up to this screen, and then he turned on the power. And what it would do, it would take the live photo, whatever you're pointing the lens at, and it would transmit it to that camera. To that screen. This is the screen right here. Okay? The screen. So if you're pointing the lens, okay, it would then show live exactly what it was that he was pointing at. And of course, this newfound thing, somebody had already patented the name television. Okay? People get very excited about it. Like, this television thing, this sounds really cool. And one guy in particular gets very excited about it. Now, unfortunately, the history about how this happened is still up in the air. Okay? There's a lot of dispute about what really happened. But by 1939... one guy in particular introduces television to the American public and to the world. And that guy is David Sarnoff. Whoa, David Sarnoff. The kid sitting in the department store window in 1912 when the Titanic sunk. The guy who helped begin and then became general manager of RCA, the NBC radio network. And because NBC Radio Network, he had two networks, NBC Red and NBC Blue, they're just blowing up all over the country. He's got the money. He's got the money to go ahead and develop this thing. And in 1939, at the World's Fair, he introduces television. Now, as you can see, it's the RCA Pavilion at the New York World's Fair. You can see the guy in the background from NBC Radio, which was broadcasting, but also you can see he's got a television camera. And if you were to go inside the pavilion and look at a screen, this is what you saw. So now think about this. You've never seen television before. You're walking through Forest Hills? Is that what it is? The greens in Forest Hills? Some of you, if you've ever been out to like Citi Field or the Arthur Ashe Tennis, where that big globe is, okay? That's where they had the 1939 World's Fair and the 1964 World's Fair. But it's 1939, you're walking through, you look over, and oh yeah, there's David Sarnoff. He's doing that thing, RCA and radio, yeah. He's probably broadcasting something on radio. So then you go inside the pavilion, and you come across the screen, and you see this. And then you look outside, and there he is. And then you look at the screen, you see this. And you look outside, and you're like, oh my God, look, he just made that move with his hand. Oh my God, that's what he just said. I just heard what he just said. I could hear from outside and inside. Oh my God. This was something new. It was television. And all throughout the summer of 1939, television was far and away the biggest exhibit at the 1939 World's Fair. So at the end of the summer, Sarnoff is thinking, I'm going to just start developing this thing. We're going to start selling television all over the country. And then came September 1st, 1939. If you're a history buff, you know what happened that day. September 1st, 1939, Blitzkrieg. Germany invades Poland. 2 days later, England and France declare war on Germany. World War II has begun. Now, although we don't get into it until the Japanese attack us in December of 1941, we got into it long before then, especially with development, especially with giving aid to our friends in England, especially by 1940 when England was by itself and Churchill needed our help. And we knew one day we would have to go after the Nazis. So what we ended up doing is taking a lot of our production going towards the war effort. So now television gets put on the shelf. Not exactly. I mean, there were still a couple of guys developing it while Sarnoff and his people put a lot more of their efforts towards the war. But once the war ended in 1945, Sarnoff and his people go right into television. And now here, of course, was one of the first television. I mean, these are the kind of television sets that you had back in 1947, 1948. As you can see, it's more boxed than screen. There's a lot of tubes and wires and resistors and stuff that are behind that particular screen, and that screen's not very big. As a matter of fact, this might be a 6 or 9 inch screen, which back then was a pretty big screen. So now, one of the things you got to do is you got to now start trying to find, well, what do we put on television? We have television. And it seems like people are going to like television. And in 1948, you see the launch of both the NBC and the CBS television networks. And then later on would be the ABC television networks. Now, of course, Sarnoff has his down pat. As did CBS with Edwin Paley. William S. Paley. William S. Paley was the president and CEO of CBS. He was kind of like Sarnoff's rival. And they both had outstanding radio networks. So when it came to setting up a television network, they knew how to set up affiliates, especially, you want to talk about expensive. You try transmitting television for a 24-hour period. You want to see an electric bill? Woo! That's a lot of electricity. So, of course, immediately, television stations will set up, if they want to go 24 hours, or if they want to have people watching them and have major talent to watch. Sarnoff says, listen, I'm the flagship television station in New York City. You put on your TV station in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Seattle, Washington, and Bangor, Maine. You put my programming on your station, and then we'll split the profits on the advertising. So that was set up already. And of course, you can't go to movies. You saw how small that screen was on that big box TV. Movie stars were stars with the big screen, so they ain't coming to TV. So that's when they raided radio. And one of the first TV stars was in 1948. NBC hired this guy to host a variety show. Now, variety shows from the very first day that television went on the air seemed to be, especially through into the early 1970s, seemed to be the way to go to start and get really good audiences going. So this guy was one of the first to go on the air. And, of course, he was one of the best.
Now, introducing the feature.
I got the wrong one. No, not yet. Hold on, I got the wrong one. All right, let me slide this here. Okay, it looks like... Oh, no. Oh, no, I might have erased something. Hold on there, people. I'll get it. Looks like I might have erased something. Okay. Well, starring in the Texaco Star Theater in 1948 was an old radio comedian by the name of Milton Berle. And Milton Berle immediately became a huge hit. Hosting his show, he would come out in drag, dressed as a woman. And of course, in 1948, 49, 50, that was absolutely hysterical. He would hit people with this big, what's that thing, lady, you powder your noses with? It would be a huge one. He'd hit people in the face and say, "Makeup!" and everybody would laugh. He would have music stars. He would have movie stars. And everybody wanted to be on the Texaco Star Theater with Milton Berle. Now, the reason why this show is so significant is it became the first #1 show in the history of television, as ratings would start being tabulated in 1948 with the debut of the networks. Well, to give you an idea of how big this show was, in 1948, America had 50,000 television sets. That's across the entire country. By 1950, there were 500,000. And that's why, to this day, Milton Berle is often referred to as Mr. Television. Is because it was Milton Berle that helped to sell TVs. People wanted to watch Uncle Milty. Now, in 1948, with only 50,000 sets, what ended up happening is you had that one person down the street that had a TV. And everybody would want to gather. I mean, you want to talk about neighbors. You have to be good neighbors because your neighbors want to come in and watch TV. And then, of course, eventually, you wanted to watch it in your own house. You would go ahead and get a television. But there is another, besides Milton Berle, going from 50,000 TV sets in 1948 to 500,000 in 1950. He was a big reason that television sold, but there was another reason. And it had to do with a significant American phenomenon. Okay? Something that happened in this country that helped to sell TV sets. Where people realized, because at this time, in 1946, right as television is about to debut, movie houses were abundant. I mean, you would go into neighborhoods where, it was only like a 5 or 6 block walk at the most to get to a theater. And you would go to the theater like 3 or 4 times a week. I mean, think about it, the way some people watch TV after dinner. You did the same thing in 1946, except you would eat dinner, and then you'd walk down the street to go to a theater. As a matter of fact, many theaters, like I said, were within 5 or 6 walking distance, and were in the center of town. Nowadays, of course, you go to a multiplex, it's attached to a mall, and you have all that parking. Well, in 1946, not everybody had abundance of cars, but like, for example, if you're from Ridgewood, if you're from Westwood, North Arlington, where the Arlington Theater is. Think about the Arlington Theater, Westwood, and Ridgewood. Where do these theaters sit? Right in the center of town. And within 5 or 6 walking blocks, people would walk and go to the theater. 3, 4 times a week, people would go to the theater. But now, you could get that viewing pleasure from your own home. You got 20 points extra. This isn't even a quiz. If you can tell me by Wednesday night, 8 p.m., what significant American phenomenon also helped to sell television sets in America between 1946, 1950, and of course by 1955, when there were millions of television sets, tens of millions all over this country. What American phenomenon helped to drive people to want to now stay home to get their viewing pleasure? All right. I'm going to leave that there. We got television part 2 coming on Thursday, and we'll see you then.